higher power than what we're using in our government system radio. Because remember, part of what makes our radios work is we got these crystal filters up front. So you don't need as much back-end signaling. And we're paying only $50 for an A to D converter. They're clocking these things at 1/4 of a gigahertz running 16 bits. Right. So these ain't cheap. They're expensive, and I would be surprised if today you can get this one in a mill temperature grade. It's probably 0 degrees C to 50 or whatever, okay? Now, with all that said, this is the general case. What do I mean by general case? Well, no matter where I move that interferer in frequency, I still get the same performance, except when I run into a case where the interferer starts revealing the Achilles heel of an A to D converter, which is its spurious performance. And what I mean by that is this. If I have a signal that goes in an A to D converter, even if in hardware, I filter it so there's no harmonics of that signal. It's clean, just a single tone. When it gets converted to in the digital realm, harmonics are digitally created. It's part of the spurious response. When you look at a chart of an A to D converter, it'll show you a nice pretty graph of it. You see these little spurious responses down there. Those are created digitally due to imperfections. Each bit is not exactly 1 millivolt up from the last. And that's where these come from. So if you think about it, and these harmonics go out, they're not hardware analog based, so it's not uncommon to have the 81st or 90th harmonic of this interfering signal be present, and when it gets up close to the sample frequency, when it gets, say 3 megahertz away, it aliases on channel. So I thought, that's got to be happening here, so let me try it, all right? So I said, okay, I know so I talked to Al Groff. I said, well, what frequency do they run the A to D converter at? Which I'll come to in a minute. I should have put it up sooner. So this is an example where here's my little desired signal. Say I'm tuned to 2.76 megahertz and I got a whomping interferer at 3 megahertz, 240 kilohertz away. Not a problem, plenty of dynamic range, right? Well, this nonlinearities of the A to D converter create in the digital realm these harmonics. So there'll be an interferer created at 6, 9, 12, 15. Still not a problem. Well, what if I get the 81st harmonic that's still there?
Do I care?
It is if it's only 2.76 megahertz away from the sample clock, because now I have an on-channel jammer. Okay. Now, some practical notes about this. If that interferer moves 100 hertz, the interferer he created just moved 8100 hertz and was out of the audio passband is no longer a problem. This is definitely a corner case, but corner cases get tested and we're required, no holds barred. The other problem too, that even though you say, okay, I've got one interferer where a harmonic, so if he moves 1 hertz, that the interfering guy moves 80, so he doesn't have to move much to be out of my audio passband. I don't have a problem anymore. But I'm passing 2 to 30, so the 79th harmonic of a signal at 3.05 megahertz is going to be a problem, and the 76th harmonic. So you can have, I went from something that within a superhet design where the close-in one is the one that really governs how well it performs. Everybody else, I don't care because my phase noise is falling off, so they don't contribute as much, to something that everything contributes equally. And so if I have multiple interferers, now in government systems, when we're doing descents, it's always stated, one interferer. Okay, here's your interferer, jack them up 100 dB, do you make it, yes or no? And then you typically don't test for multi-interferers because for decades, radios have been superhets, right? Well, duh, the further away you get, who cares if there's a bunch of interferers out there? The crystal filter is going to knock them out even further, or in the case of reciprocal mix, the LO noise keeps falling off. But sticking with this, how much of a problem is it when I run into this scenario? Well, so here's an example on a flex display. So what I did, and I know it's kind of hard to see, so this is 760,758. This is about 2 kilohertz. I'm zoomed way in. That's about 2 kilohertz a span right there. Here's my desired signal at 27585 and some change, and plus a kilohertz up. And my interferer is out in the parking lot, 240 kilohertz away at 3 meg. Okay. And here's this little guy, here's effectively the 81st harmonic, the alias is back on channel. And one of the ways I proved it to myself is with the signal generator I was using to generate the 3 meg interferer, I moved it by 10 hertz. That moved by 810. I moved it 20 hertz the other way. It moved by 1620 hertz. So it was real, it was there, and you could replicate it. Now, this is a case here where my desired signal, I'm not changing it. It's always at minus 113 dBm all the time. And so here's a case where my interferer is at minus 23 dBm, and here's the interferer that lands in channel. Now, let me drop the interferer by 1 dB. Gone. Now, keep in mind, these divisions are 5 dB per division. So 1 dB change in that interferer resulted in 5, 10, 15, 20 plus noise change. So now I'm down to minus 24 dBm, gone. Well, let me keep dropping the level down to minus 28 dBm. Oh, it came back. Let me drop it down to minus 34, gone. Let me drop it 1 more dB down to minus 35. It's back up and even stronger than it was before. Again, this has to do with the fact that the nonlinearities in the A to D converter have to do with individual bit steps. When you start tickling them, they have a nonlinear response. It's not a one-for-one type deal. In fact, if you were to quantify it, it's more of a stair-step type phenomenon. If it's kind of a gross way to describe it, but it's not like what I'm typically used to thinking about, which is, when things move 1 to 1, 3 to 1, nice, log progressions and things like that. So
could that ever be improved? If you ever get DAs that are more linear?
Or knock the spurious response down. Because keep in mind that you're always going to have spurious responses. The issue is, how far down are they from full scale? Full scale limits your overall dynamic range, right? My interferer can't, once it clips. So how far, so when I do, and by the way, these levels as I showed here are in general independent of the level of the interferer that's generating them. Now when you get low enough, I couldn't find them anymore, they were gone. I mean, you do get low enough, it's fine, but let's look at it a slightly different way. Okay, so what this is showing is how much desense do I have? 1 dB is my requirement, and this is the interferer level relative to my desired signal. Now, I have a green line and I have a red line. Now, why is that? Well, it turns out that for our airborne radios, we have a 2-tiered requirement that I won't go into, and if Gail Lawson was in here, I'd point at him because he's the cause of it anyways, and I'm not making that up. So suffice it to say, if you take the mil standard per Hoyle, that green line rules, which means an interferer 100 dB up or less, I can only have 1 dB of descent, so I need to stay below this, okay? So what's in light blue and dark blue is our superhet military rate HF radios as measured on how much descents you have as based on the interferer level. Just 2 different tuned frequencies is what I've shown here. What's in black is all of this goofiness just displayed a different way. And that is, okay, so I quantified how much descents I had when that guy was coming up and down. And so what you get is this, where all of a sudden when the interferer's only 78 dB up, I've got 2.5 dB of descents. Then I go another dB higher, nothing. Go another dB higher and back to 2 dB. So I keep bouncing above my pass-fail limit until eventually when I get up here, if you ignore these, which you can't, but if you were to ignore them, I mean, it's basically following as good or maybe slightly better than a superhet design. And of course, the superhet will start to outperform it a little bit if you really want to push it, because the clip point of the hardware is going to be a little bit higher than this A to D converter is, just because I've got hardware filters to help me out. So,
Did Matt Youngblood see this?
no, I haven't. No, as a matter of fact, we can talk afterwards. And this was part of that presentation I did for, and I've anesthetized it a little bit here, and I'll probably want to do the same thing. And if you want to, I'll give it to you. And if you want to hand it to him, but yeah. So what Tim's talking about here is that a while back, Tim and I got on with, what's the gentleman's name? Matt Youngblood at Flex Systems, and I was talking about some of the stuff I was seeing, and they said, no, it should be pretty much 1-to-1. I said, no, it doesn't work that way. I said, and I told them on the phone, I said, I'll be the first to admit, I can't regurgitate the mathematical closed loop formula to describe it. All I can say is I recognize it's there. I have a subjective handle on what causes it, but I can't nail down and say, oh yeah, it's the band gap junction of that dated reference and stuff, So it was news to them. It was news to them. But I don't think anyone ever, not probably from an amateur standpoint, had ever got down and actually quantified it to this level. Okay.
So, hey Mike, can we hold for a second?
Yeah.
I want to check.